Is it a good deal for Alberta and therefore Canada, or is it a bad deal? Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. We all saw Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith shake hands on Thursday. Carney flew to Alberta, flew to Calgary, met with the Premier. They signed a memorandum of understanding, and it was far more than I ever expected, far more detailed than I ever expected. There are deadlines, there are commitments from both sides. This is not the type of usual MOU that I see from government, which is so vague that it means nothing. This one means something. An end to the emissions cap, an end to the tanker ban if pipeline gets built, an end to the clean energy regulations. There are so many wins for Alberta in this. So I and my colleagues at the Toronto Sun, the Edmonton Sun, the Calgary Sun, we all proclaimed this a good deal for Alberta. The Premier of Alberta is declaring it a good deal. We put it across our front pages. Rick Bell did say, look, Premier's got to sell this to the people of Alberta. That's correct. But this appears to be the type of deal that Alberta has been looking for. Do I love everything in it? Do I love the industrial carbon tax and the hike in that? No. Do I love Pathways Alliance? No. And I know so many people that have been working on that for years as a way to try and get the federal government to say yes to a pipeline. People who have spent years trying to say, just let us do carbon capture and storage and we will build a pipeline. That was their way to try and get to yes. Alberta, in my view, had to give up less than what they got out of this deal. So for me, that's a good thing. But a lot of you say that's not the case. You say, well, I'm a Toronto guy. I don't know anything about Western Canada. I don't know anything about Alberta. I don't know anything about the oil sands. But I do know Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. So I reached out to her and said, come on, talk with me about this. Let me know what you think, why this is a good deal, and why you want the people of Alberta to believe in this. Here is our conversation. So, Premier Danielle Smith, let me ask you, is this a good deal or a bad deal for Alberta? Because I looked to your announcement yesterday. I've never seen you look so happy in my life. I said, this is a good deal for Alberta. The Premier likes it, and I'm getting flack nonstop all day. I heard there was a little bit of booing. I don't want to overplay it, but there was a little bit of booing at your conference. What do you say to people who are saying, oh, no, this is a bad deal for Alberta? Explain
Well,
to
let,
them why this is good.
let me start with the booing because I said, I hope you feel confident that Canada works better today than you felt 2 days ago. And that was what the booing was. So I think that says to me there's still a lot of work that we need to do, that our,
Yeah.
our, our membership is unhappy about a whole range of things. The suppression of our economy for the past 10 years is only one of a long list of grievances. But
And,
I think
and
it's
I
an important one to get
and,
to get done
and
and
I hear
dusted.
that. And
Yes.
I get that. Despite being a Toronto guy, you know me. I
Yes.
love Western Canada. I understand Alberta. I understand Saskatchewan. But for people that are saying, "Well, you're just a Toronto guy. You don't understand. Um, this is just a load of BS." Well, you're the premier of Alberta. You know Alberta better than I do. What do you say to them?
It depends on which part of the deal you're talking about, because one of the things people have to remember is that if you had told me 2 months ago that the federal government was going to not implement the emissions cap, I would have been elated. We did a major national advertising campaign against that particular policy.
Yeah.
If you would have told me a few months ago that they were going to carve out the CERs so that the clean electricity regs didn't apply in Alberta so that we could build natural gas power plants, I would have been elated because we did another national campaign on that. So those two policies alone have been foundational in trying to restore investor confidence. And as it turns out, I put nine bad policies on the table. I got movement on 7 out of the 9. And on top of that, we also have an agreement that if the bitumen pipeline goes ahead, we'll build the Pathways project. If the Pathways project goes ahead, we'll build the bitumen pipeline. They're interconnected. And so, that's important, I think,
And
to
then
understand.
if you get that, you get movement on the tanker ban.
Completely. And so that's why I'm really encouraged is that again, you asked me a few months ago, do you think you should restart the conversation about building a pipeline to the BC coast? No one would have even thought that that was going to even be possible to begin the conversation. And now it's begun. And so I think that that is really a measure of just how much the recalibration in the global economy and the recalibration in Canada has been over the past year with the disruption in our relationship with the United States, with the need to find new markets, with the value of our energy products. That to me, I think, is a positive indication that even the liberals, with many of them who imposed these bad policies over the past 10 years, that they've had to do a complete reversal. And I think that's going to be good for Alberta, and it's going to be good for the country.
You and I sat on a stage together in Calgary in early September, and you said that a pipeline to the Northwest Coast was your number one priority. Did you think at that point that you'd be here? I mean, look, I get it. The pipeline is not approved yet. There is no proponent. But did you think you would be at this point? Because you've been very positive with Prime Minister Carney. When myself and others have been, well, he's not quite delivering, you've been saying, hold on, hold on. Did you think you'd get to this point?
I can tell you, I saw early indications that he was going to be very different from his predecessor. The first move he did was to abandon the retail carbon tax, which could not have been easy for him to do with the caucus that he had. He campaigned on being an energy superpower, talking about conventional as well as new energy. He suspended the net zero vehicle regulations pending further review, and I think those are probably going to go out the door as well. So I
I'm
saw.
not sure about that, but we'll see.
Well, I there's no way to implement it. So, I'll watch and see, because that's another one that's going to have an impact on us. We drive a lot of F-150s in Alberta. They're not the electric vehicle type. So we want to make sure that we can continue to have the vehicles that are going to work in our economy to be able to continue fueling it. But I would say I saw some indication that he was prepared to do reversals on some pretty significant pieces of Trudeau's agenda. So I thought, okay, well, you've made some progress on a few of them. Here's the 9 bad laws that we want to see you move on. And as I said, as we started talking about what it is we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve is brand new markets. What we're trying to achieve is some kind of differentiation away from the U.S. market, where we become overly reliant. And when I saw the impact of the Trans Mountain Pipeline on the value of our product, the opening up of new markets, it's very obvious to me that that's where the future lies, is Asian markets. And it appears that the Prime Minister agrees.
So Trans Mountain opening up increased capacity
Uh-huh.
helped you get a better price on
Mhm.
Western Canadian Select, which, we all think about when you hear about the price of oil, you're either hearing Brent crude or more likely Western Texas. But for Canada, it's Western Canadian Select. And you saw an increase in the price on that once Trans Mountain opened up.
Yeah, well, imagine this. I mean, the differential used to trend as high as $30. So think about that. If you had a barrel of WTI crude, you could now sell it today for around $60. We were having to sell our Western Canada Select for $30. And every dollar off of WTI is worth $750 million to our provincial coffers, not to mention the amount of money it's worth to a company that's trying to earn a profit so that they can reinvest. So when Trans Mountain began, and we now have demonstrated we have new markets, that differential has shrunk to about $11. There'll always be a little bit higher. There's more upgrading that needs to be done, longer distances it needs to travel. But we're pretty happy at that differential being closed. And if we continue down this pathway of developing diversified markets, it'll be good for Alberta because we'll generate more revenue, but the federal government generates more revenue too. They get corporate income taxes, they get personal income taxes. It's going to be good for to ensure that all of us have the revenue that we need to pay for the continued cost pressures that we have.
In terms of what you need to go forward, do you have enough to say that a pipeline will happen? I've had people asking me for the last 24, 36 hours. Well, but will a pipeline actually be built? We heard Pierre Poilievre talk about this. Can you give us a date? Can you give us a year? Can you give us a decade when a pipeline will be built? And my answer, and Premier Danielle, I'm not blowing sunshine here. I just said, if you don't think that Danielle Smith has been working on this for a while to have something on the back burner, then you're underestimating her. But my sense is that there's going to be a private sector proponent, because this is what all my colleagues keep asking Prime Minister Carney. Well, and liberals who don't support what the prime minister is doing keep saying, well, but if there's no private sector proponent, then there's no pipeline. And they're putting that forward as a good thing. And my view is there's going to be a private sector proponent. Someone will come forward and say, yep, I will do this. Do you suspect? Do you believe? Or do you perhaps know? Do you have someone in mind who's going to be willing to build this?
Well, I can tell you we stepped up as the proponent for a couple of reasons. Because we're, first of all, it's our resource. We own 85% of the resource. So as an owner, we have an interest in seeing capacity built. Second of all, we have a vehicle called the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. So we have the ability to underwrite Indigenous ownership. So that's another reason why we're at the table. But the third important thing is that we've got every major pipeline company and all their expertise at the table helping us to craft the technical submission. So that says to me that there's a lot of enthusiasm on the part of those companies to understand what the technical details are, to do their own scoping, their own assessment. And once we get it on the major projects list, I would expect one or a consortium of them to step forward. One of the things you have to, there's a few things to
Well,
remember.
it does say one or more pipelines
Yep, it sure
in the
does.
deal.
And there's a reason for that too. One thing I would say is that the way pipelines get constructed is if you had a normal market so that you didn't have any barriers, a pipeline company would say, "Hey, I see a demand in Europe. I'm going to go out to the market and do a test to see if anybody wants to pledge barrels to me to build this pipeline." But why would anyone do that if you had an emissions cap that was going to cause you to shut in production? Why would you do that if you had a tanker ban that wouldn't allow you, even if you wanted to build a pipeline to load it up? So we had a chicken and egg problem. There wasn't going to be a proponent that came forward until the bad laws were addressed. And now that the bad laws are addressed, it's going to take some time for a proponent to come forward. But this is an industry that's been pummeled. They have lost literally billions of dollars, maybe even as much as $10 billion on failed regulatory exercises that they invested years in trying to get approvals, only to find out that there wasn't a pathway in sight to get it to completion. So this is the challenge the federal government's going to have. They have to have some credibility in their major projects office process. They have to know that when somebody gets on the list, you genuinely do get to the approvals that you need within 2 years. And we're going to test that out. So I would just want people to manage expectations that way. That what we're agreeing to with the new major projects office, we'll be putting in our application next year. I don't know how long it will take for them to put it officially on the list. And then that starts the clock on the 2-year window to get all of the regulatory and consultation lined up. And then and once that's approved, then you have to go through and do the construction, which could take 3 or 4 years. So my anticipation of this project is that it would likely come on stream sometime in the early 30s. That said, now that we've created an environment, no emissions cap, so it's not a production cap. Now Enbridge can go and do their open season for their 400,000 barrels they want to expand their main line. TMX can go forward with their 360,000 barrels that they want to advance for their expansion. The South Bow, who has the old Keystone assets, they can go to the market on their 650,000 barrels that they want to build down to the U.S., and so on and so on and so on. We needed to have the emissions cap gone, as well as on the natural gas side, the clean electricity regs for that to begin. And that's what I'll be watching for. That should be the early indicator of whether market confidence has returned. And then we'll continue through the process to get some reboot of a Northwest BC Coast pipeline on the major projects list.
Okay, you mentioned Keystone XL. You mentioned South Bow. For folks that don't know, South Bow now owns the Keystone XL route. They spun off from TC Energy. Is that a backroom part of this deal? I mean, this is what some people are talking about, that really there's no plan to get a pipeline to the Northwest Coast. This is just so that there's cover for Carney to get a pipeline via the old Keystone XL route so that he can get a deal with Trump.
I don't think that is a secret. That's very, I think everyone's very open about that. The U.S. president has said he wants a reboot of that deal. I've spoken about that as well.
Well, I mean, he's approved the cross-border side of it, and South Bow's open to it. But I mean, my question is, just so people don't take you saying things out of context, my question is this really about a pipeline to the Northwest Coast, or is this a head fake to get a Keystone XL rebooted?
The MOU very clearly talks about a 1 million barrel a day bitumen pipeline to Asian markets and the need to potentially have a tanker ban carve out if we
so
identify
that doesn't go through
that's
Galveston, Texas?
You don't need a tanker ban carve-out to go down to Galveston, Texas. I think the thing we need to understand is the American production under the U.S. president that we have, the American production increase is going to happen because they need it. They have we have already seen that we have a number of Canadian companies that are partnering with American companies to advance projects. Some of them I think are more advanced than others. And you've got an Interior Secretary in Doug Burgum who is shrinking the approval timelines to I think weeks, not years, weeks and months. And so I would say that now that we have a deal with Canada, now we can start talking with the U.S. about how they want to also expand their infrastructure. To me, it's not one or the other. It's both. It's all of the above. And I think that that's the mindset that Canadians need to get into. If you look at the OPEC assessment, they think we're going to need 123 million barrels a day by 2050. Canada should be a growing share of that growing market. And that's what we would intend to do.
I know people like to play up that there's some big fight between you and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, but he was asked about this the other day, and he said, we need pipelines west, we need pipelines north, we need them east, we need them south. Sounds like you guys are on the same page on that.
Can I just compliment Doug Ford? I just saw when we were making our announcement, he's announced an historic deal with local Indigenous bands to work on building a road to the Ring of Fire.
The
Like
Ring
that,
of Fire,
that's
it
going to
was
be
very
really
similar.
important. Yes,
Yeah. Oh,
completely.
hugely important. But okay, so what do you say then to people that are saying we're giving up on climate? We are, just abandoning any sense that Canada is going to do what we need to do on climate. And then you've got your own people who are saying you bought a bunch of magic beans for Pathways Alliance. How do you bring the two sides together?
Well, I would say a couple of things that to understand what the Pathways Alliance is, it's our sixth biggest oil sands company. They made a decision years ago that their way to secure market access and to deliver what their customers wanted was to have a lower emissions barrel than anyone else. Remember, our oil competes against Venezuela and Iran and Russia. And that's part of the reason why I think they have such confidence that the people who buy our product will want it for heavy oil. Exactly. That's why they're confident that our customers would want to be able to have that additional premium as a result of having a lower emissions barrel. The other thing I would say is we're not the only ones doing this. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are also going down the same path. They're looking at ways to invest in decarbonization, whether it's the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, using alternative energies to reduce the emissions on the production side, or direct air capture, including nature-based solutions. We're doing all of the above. And so I think that that's what people need to understand is that if you've got these highly profitable companies using some of their own profits to invest in this kind of emissions reduction technology, that's going to be good for the planet. So I think that's the reason why we've linked those two things together. The oil sands companies have a will to do it. We have a will to support them, but we know that they need a new revenue stream in order to be able to pay for it. And that's what a new 1 million barrel a day bitumen pipeline would do.
Well, and I can tell you that a man that you didn't serve at the same time with, but who made me drive all the way to Estevan to interview him,
Oh.
Brad Wall, former Premier of Saskatchewan, was very proud to open the Boundary Dam and their carbon capture and storage back in 2014 when I had to go to that. So it's not a new technology. It is one that folks have been pushing for a long time. Premier Smith, thanks for the time. Maybe you've convinced some people, maybe not, but I still think you got a big win, so congratulations.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. Be blunt, be honest, but be fair in terms of what you think of this deal. And let's move forward, hopefully, as a country, to get things moving once again.